Guruve Gaura Chanjaya Radhikaya Tadare Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tada Bhaktaya Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Dhanavad Pranam devotees. So, from the title of the session here, do we need material validation for pure bhakti? It's based on some recent both questions and conversations that I've had, and I just thought I would take some time to try to both answer the questions that came in and simultaneously kind of offer a particular posture regarding the entire concept of what seems like maybe a more overwhelming state of material things coming in to the arena of bhakti. So I've recently seen something that was shown to me regarding various either scientific or part of the human sciences like psychology, sociology, etc., or other spiritual paths which may have some similarities but also many divergent ideas from bhakti. And I've seen sort of in that collective space many intentional or unintentional challenges to bhakti. So I did a question and answer session a short time ago where I spoke about in some detail the difference between pure bhakti and misapplied bhakti, either institutionally or individually. And sort of the framework of what I'm speaking now would be enhanced if a person is able to go back and look at that particular video. So the idea here is that much of the idea of all of the other sources coming in as sort of prisms through which to look at bhakti, and in many cases critique bhakti, are things which are not themselves necessarily composed of pure bhakti. So the question would be, can these material things really validate bhakti? And the answer, of course, in short, is no. So it's not a question that there is therefore a complete lack of value in anything other than Swarup Siddhi Bhakti, that everything else has just no absolute value at all. For as long as we have to exist in the material world, we have to function in the material world. Certainly we will take the opinion of our medical professional, certainly we'll take the opinion of our barber, certainly we'll take the opinion of, our grocer, is this fresh or not? You understand? So in pragmatic dealing, certainly, what hard sciences or human sciences are there, they have some footing and some application. Only where they themselves have vetting from the science of pure bhakti can they be usable in exactly what it means to perform bhakti. The first element is saranagati. And the first element of saranagati is anukulyasya sankalpa, a vow that I will take only those things which are favorable to bhakti. So obviously we are utilizing so many things, including this iPad, as a means to do anukul seva to bhakti. So it is not an extremist view that we're using material things in order to employ them in the service of bhakti. So, but however, it is a little bit of a divergence from pure bhakti to utilize those things to attempt to validate or vet the authenticity of pure bhakti. Because bhakti itself is swata siddha. It means it is self-perfect. And therefore, if we want to vet bhakti, we'll have to come through the channels of bhakti to look at bhakti. Bhaktya sanjatya bhakta. Bhaktya. This is written in 11th canto Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhakti comes from bhakti. And its only vetting process is pure bhakti itself. The repositories of pure bhakti are both the Bhagavat Sastra and the person Bhagavat. So the pure devotee and the Sastras and sadhus, right? So sadhu, guru, sastra, these are the vetting processes to look at and to understand bhakti. Anything else will be covered by the faults of the 4 defects of material perception. Cheating, making mistakes, the imperfection of senses, and I'm not thinking of the last one right offhand, but these 4 defects are inherent in the material arena. So in material consciousness, those 4 defects are there, and therefore it's mentioned aprakritavastu na prakritagocha. Therefore, material substance and material consideration cannot see or analyze aprakritavastu. Aprakritavastu means those things which have as their nature pure transcendence. So pure bhakti is of that nature. So material things and material facilities will not be able to give understanding of pure bhakti. One difficulty is that the very nature of the material self-conception, the abhiman that I am this body, and all of the things that this particular karmic portfolio holds that I identify with, we tend to want to utilize those things as not things that are completely surrendered to the lotus feet of Hari Guru Vaishnava as a means of serving Bhagavan, but use them in some cases as a means to validate or vet bhakti. You understand? And in many cases also, because everyone looks for consensus and support. So consensus means I need to find other people who feel the same way, and then they will become a mutual support for my feelings. Right? So it'll be my community, my tribe, etc., etc. So in doing that, many people gravitate towards many material sources, and they bring in sayings from those material sources, and they stand them up against perceived inadequacies or issues with bhakti. Again, we have to go back to that template. Is it pure bhakti or is it misapplied bhakti that either came by institutional or personal dealings? Universally, there's no question about it. Anybody who's suffering from some kind of trauma, psychologically, emotionally, or any other way, that has purportedly come from an experience with bhakti, it means it was misapplied bhakti. Because pure bhakti has no element in it which would provide suffering to the jiva. The very premise of bhakti is that we are the atma, or the soul, and not the body. And in the soul, it is clear that the soul is dukkha pratiyogitva. It means the soul has no misery in it. So even the soul itself has no misery. What of the super soul? What of the domain and activities and functions of the energies of the Supreme Being? How will they be imbued with misery? So how we could have gleaned that I got my emotional trauma, suffering, etc. from Bhakti, or quote the Gaudiya tradition, or quote Vaishnavism, I don't really understand, because Gaudiya in its true meaning means pure Bhakti. Vaishnavism in its pure meaning means pure Bhakti. So if you've contacted something that had the label or the facade of Gaudiya or Vaishnavism, and in that arena you experience some emotional trauma or some lack of proper vision, it was due to one of two things, or a combination. Either it was misapplied bhakti, and I've already described that could be institutional or personal, or it was some lacking or some growing in your own consciousness that needed to take place to have the true appreciation of what is pure bhakti. I'm especially saying this because in one of the things that was sent to me, it was a statement of someone, I don't know who they are, I don't know if it was from a book or a paper, or it was just somebody's statement. They made a statement regarding that anyone who believes, I'm paraphrasing here, the infallibility of the Shastras, and therefore have activities which are inhumane, then, I'm trying to paraphrase the whole thing, then something about them is misguided. And then they went on to state, this is inclusive of not putting, for instance, our Srila Prabhupada or any other Vaishnavas above critique in this regard. So, of course, the issue here is that there would then be indication that our Srila Prabhupada, for instance, could be subject to the same kind of material influences, what to speak of our Srila Prabhupada, even Sastra could be subject to the kind of material faults that would breed dealing with either Sastra or Srila Prabhupada or sadhus of that caliber. It would give rise to some kind of inhumanity. So the question here is, if we are trying to practice pure bhakti and we're accepting what is favorable, and the Shastra says that in the words of pure Vaishnavas, the four defects that I talked about before, they are not present, subject to be illusion, to make mistakes, the cheating propensity and imperfect senses, they're not there in the pure souls, then I either have to ignore that spiritual reality stated in both Shastra and in the persona of Shastra pure devotees. I'd have to ignore that to accommodate the subjective statement of that person based in what, I'm not sure, maybe some, again, contact with misapplied bhakti, or maybe just some of their own personal issues. I don't know. But the statement is obviously put in a public forum, so it's begging that those who are pursuing pure bhakti, you even have no dependence or shelter independence on Shastra and pure Vaishnavas. Because there's some sort of axiomatic conflation, that there's an axiomatic possibility of inhumanity by just fully accepting them. When Saranagati literally means that, right? Saranagati literally means the Anukulasya Sankalpa, and that same Sankalpa goes to Pratikulasya Vibhajanam, meaning not accepting anything unfavorable, and Rakshishiti Vishwas, a Vishwas that the Shastra, Sadhus, Bhagavan is absolute, Goptre Varanam Tata, they are completely maintaining everything. You understand? So I'm being asked, essentially through that phrase of that person, that no, you can't do that because that could be a kind of naivete that could lead to inhumanity. Therefore, even in pure bhakti, pure persons related to bhakti, the possibility that dealing with them could give rise to inhumanity of some sort is what's proposed. So then if we have no ability to rely on the absolute nature of Sastra and Sadhu Guru, then where can we repose faith in an absolute way? Would it be reposed in your subjective experiences? Or is the idea just to put faith sort of in a relative posture that there is no real shelter? And perhaps that's the baseline of the emotional experience that person is having, and therefore, there's a saying, that kind of misery loves company sort of idea, that if I'm experiencing this, it must be not my just subjective experiences, especially because people then, like I said, they try to get a consensus. That means other people may be having a similar experience. And on the basis of that, form a tribe, and then it's put out that this is the reality based on our subjective experience consensus, and we're putting it out that this is the reality. So what's being asked essentially is that people divest the faith in that absolute idea that Sastra is absolute, and that anything that is seen to be incongruent is my lack of ability to reconcile it, and also in the personification of Sastra, the pure Vaishnava, that also these incongruities may be there, and I need to accept that because of your subjective experience. So this is just something that, there are certain perennial issues that come up every year. I think I mentioned this in a previous video. And then there's sometimes every 3 or 4 years, you get a real thrust of things like this, where there's like almost a challenge to the establishment of bhakti. But again, there's not a clarification as to bhakti meaning pure bhakti, because if you're saying it's pure bhakti, and when you say the Gaudiya tradition, or when you say Gaudiya Vaishnavism, right, then you're suggesting that it is pure bhakti that needs to come under scrutiny. And if it's not pure bhakti, then it should be easily reconcilable within your own experience that what I encountered or what I'm speaking to is not pure bhakti or pure Vaishnavas. I'm speaking to that misapplied, corrupted bhakti, and I'm speaking to those who may have not been pure devotees, and therefore they're also subject to the same human frailties that I myself am subject to. You understand? And in our interaction, there was some bad experience. And therefore, I'm putting out a warning against corrupted or misapplied bhakti and those who are not perfected souls, but who may be in positions of authority or something like that, and therefore their misapplied bhakti has this fact, that fact, it's making them inhumane. That's a whole different statement. And if I've misinterpreted what was said, then I certainly will both stand corrected and apologize. But because the name of our Srila Prabhupada was invoked, then I have every, of course, duty and right to speak back or to push back on the idea that your indication or your inference that absolute acceptance of the scripture and persons of the caliber of Srila Prabhupada or any pure Vaishnava, right? Blind acceptance of that has some connection with the possibility even of inhumanity. And even if you wanted to take it a step further and say that there is a possibility that somebody could certainly have some kind of association, not absolute or pure association, not true sangha, samyak rupen anugamana, not that kind of sangha, right? But somebody could have some proximity association with a high class of pure Vaishnava, but still have many material contaminations themselves. That also is something different. But to suggest that in the persona of pure Vaishnavas and also in Sastra, that there is a inherent ability by fully giving our faith, fully investment of our faith in those persons and in Sastra, that there's a possibility that it will create a naivete in our consciousness that will give rise to being inhumane in our treatment to others. So I would first like to see any evidence of inhumanity on the part of any pure Vaishnava historically. I'm not even looking at just contemporary Vaishnavas. Now, sometimes we may couch inhumanity according to our subjective experience. It may be inhumane to hear the absolute truth because it's inconvenient and something I'm not willing to surrender to. So to be in the arena where that absolute truth is being presented will give me a certain kind of psycho-emotional experience. Because Bhakti, Saranagati, is not only the first anga of Bhakti, but it is the doorway to Bhakti. Prahalad Maharaj told, all the 9 angas of Bhakta, Shravam Kirtan Vishnu Smarna, without Ittipum Zaprita Vishnu, Bhaktas Chinnavalakshan. Without doing Saranagati, you cannot adequately practice these 9 angas of Bhakti. Also, Guru Padasraya is the same thing. It is Saranagati. And therefore, before Rupa Goswami Pad enunciates the 64 angas of Bhakti, he requires the first thing is Guru Pad Asraya. So really, in many cases, the issue at hand is the unwillingness due to the strength of false ego and the strength of identification with our self-conception, that we are unwilling to surrender that to the ideal of being the actual servant of absolute truth. Our actual identity is dasatva. Jiva Goswami wrote in Paramatma Sandarbha, Paramaika Seshitva. Seshitva, dasatva means the same thing. This is the absolute truth. And it begins in Saranagati. But the idea that I want my independence, and I bolster that based on my false ego is the security blanket for the particular upadi that I have in this life, right? I am so-and-so, I am a learned person, I am a PhD, or I belong to a socially victimized class, and based on the historical social victimization of a particular class, so forth, so on, I deserve to have a voice that's heard, even a voice that could challenge the absolute truth, right? And I've told again in many cases, right, and I'm a little apologetic because I do have some actual questions that have been written in that are philosophical based, and I want to spend time to, especially when I have the ability to have other senior devotees come on who could really help in those regards. I want to spend time to give vision to those things. But at the same time, if a fire arises, that fire has to be dealt with. So the fire of misconception and the fire of, and the thrust, not only a fire, but a fire spreads. So that the thrust of how that fire spreads in the Vaishnava Mandal is very important. And of course, the favorable wind for the spreading of misconception is social media. So you go on to social media, you create certain concepts and ideas, and people who maybe not be so mature in pure bhakti or not had so much experience in pure bhakti, they begin to resonate. They divest faith out of pure bhakti, start divesting faith in the subjective sort of material, quasi-spiritual situations, and in this way it takes people away from the path of true bhakti. So I think there is some duty on the part of those Vaishnavas who are still unfolding, but are unfolding under the guidance of pure Vaishnavas, to put some offering on the table for innocent persons, for one, and for persons who just maybe by hearing will take a different introspection about their particular stance in relation to bhakti. Just like I did have 3 or 4 people write immediately after the previous video that yes, I kind of maybe was blaming bhakti overall because I did not make a separation between pure bhakti and misapplied bhakti. They had not even heard the term before, right? And of course, the term has to be born out of the necessity to explain that whatever you experienced could not have been pure bhakti, because pure bhakti would not be inclusive of experiences that you're talking about, inhumanity, etc., etc. So, or bias, or so forth and so on. Just like in the case of our Srila Prabhupada. The person, I think, was also hinting at, which has also come up in the past again, certain statements that are written in Srila Prabhupada's books that have some sociological implications, especially may not appear to be politically correct in the contemporary environment. But if you take one context into consideration, in almost every single case, it's not what's perceived by those who are having the issue with those statements, whether it's about women or minorities or whatever it might be. Secondly, you have to go to intent. Now, maybe this is, my almost 17 or 18 years in law enforcement and going to court many times or whatever it is, that if I needed to have a case made up, I had to prove in the writing of that case what the criminal intent was. It could not just be an action, but the action had to be born of some kind of criminal intent. So in the same way, if we're going to look at statements about Srila Prabhupada, we have to go back to intent. So if you're saying that these statements, though they may reflect some kind of political incorrectness in our contemporary environment, were they actually based in misogyny or racism or classism? Because if you're thinking like that, you are directly thinking that Srila Prabhupada was either misogynist, racist, classist. You're actually attributing those qualities, which are material qualities, to a pure Vaishnava. And perhaps it's because of that thinking that the true perception and the true perspective is not coming. Because maybe you had a previous bad experience with someone who was not a pure devotee. So from the basis of that experience, you're fighting against bhakti, not realizing that what you experienced was never really bhakti. Bhakti comes from bhakti. I already quoted that verse. And that bhakti in this world is disseminated by a Vaishnava, not even by Bhagavan. Bhakti comes through a Vaishnava. Sava Sangamena Ratnyanko Rupeva Mati. The seed of bhakti is distributed by sadhus in this world. Paramasvatantra Bhagavad Bhakta. It's mentioned in Madhurya Kandamini. It is the Paramasvatantrata Bhagavad Bhakta. Means Bhagavan is granted independence to a devotee to administer bhakti. And even those bhaktas who are on the Uttam Bhagavat platform, they come down to the platform of Madhyam Bhagavat, Prema Maitri Kripupeksh, in order to disseminate bhakti according to the inspiration coming in the heart. Their mercy is stimulated and they're distributing bhakti based on that. But they see division. They are praying for Bhagavan. They see who is innocent. They see those who are envious. And they act according to that. And they make friendship with Vaishnava. So pray Maitri Kripupeksh. You understand? So those pure Vaishnavas who are distributing bhakti like that, they are not containers of material inebrities or faults. That's clearly mentioned. I already mentioned earlier. Therefore, if you view them in that way, it is ignorance in its least bad case, and it is aparad in the worst case. So it's very important for us to put forward the truth about these things, because in some ways there is just the nature of the energy of Kali Yuga, and Kali needs agency. And many people become unwilling or willing agents of Kali by attacking the nature of bhakti and its absoluteness. So in part it may be due to their unwillingness to surrender, Two, it may be to some bad experience, again, from misapplied bhakti and a need to attack the emotional trauma they suffered, right? Right? The need to defend their emotional state. And therefore they lash back out. But again, there's no differentiation, made between pure bhakti and misapplied bhakti. And so in the course of trying to lash out, right, rather than taking a deeper shelter of pure bhakti, to lash back out at bhakti, you end up offending the process of bhakti or the bhakta, and that deepens the state of misunderstanding that's present. So I think it is extremely important, and I would be more than willing, and I'm sure other devotees who are trying to unfold and trying to serve the path of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, I would be completely amenable to sitting with anyone and having a true discussion on this particular issue. Because I think without having some kind of forum where people can see in discussion this kind of rationale, and also vet whether or not these statements that I'm even making, are they true or not? Is there pure bhakti which has no faults whatsoever, and pure devotees which have no faults, or is that a naivete on my part? You understand? So if you want to sit to discuss that, then I'm completely amicable to reasonable discussion. And of course, discussion runs through many tracks. Vad, Jalpa, Vitanda. So Vad means a discussion in which we're looking mutually for the absolute truth. But if you are looking for catharsis, if you're looking for rebellion, if you're looking for any number of other things, and you're not looking for the truth, there'd be doubtful whether the discussion would be fruitful. If we're genuinely both looking, and you can show me where there's fault in pure bhakti or fault in pure Vaishnavas, and you're willing to hear, and I'm willing to hear, then perhaps some real progress can be made, and that will truly be called, because I'm getting so many things from what is called progressive Vaishnavism. And I have no qualms at all with the idea of progressive Vaishnavism if it is an indication of making progress in bhakti. Bhakti itself is Swatta Siddha, I've already mentioned. Therefore, bhakti cannot become progressive. Bhakti is the zenith of progress. You understand? But we certainly can become progressive in our approach in pure bhakti. So if the nature of the vision of what is progressive Vaishnava is based on the idea of making progress in pure bhakti, I completely co-sign this saying, progressive Vaishnavism. But if it is a sort of contemporarily inspired nomenclature that's being put on bhakti because there's a perception that there's some faults in archaic practices of bhakti, etc., then I would still say that's something we could bring to the table, and discuss. Because my feeling is, if it is some new ideal that has been brought to the table, what is the source of that vision? What is the source of the statement? What is the source of the perception of that name, progressive Vaishnavism? Now, there are many things, just like sometimes I hear terms related to it, and also I don't want to, and this is something that I've been very clear on in previous videos. Every time somebody speaks from another perspective and you get group dynamics happening, it's not helpful. So I'm not presenting the versus side of things. Well, this is a versus progressive Vaishnavism. It's not. It's an offering of perspective. I'm also pursuing the path of bhakti. And in hearing these things, or these things coming into my purview, either related to service that I've been doing, or just comes into my purview via this mechanism of the social media, then I again have some savor duty or just some personal duty to address in my own progress this presentation. So it has nothing to do with challenging or verses or anything like that. And that mentality that anybody who offers another perspective is challenging, and therefore it's verses, and there's an emotional recoiling based on that, it is symptomatic that something needs to be personally dealt with, because you cannot have your subjective experience questioned. I'm open completely to having my experience questioned, to sit and discuss. Is this perspective of absolute faith in Guru Sadhu and Sastra, is that a naivete, or is that an actual progressive posture in Sudha Bhakti? So, I mean, I'm completely open and willing to have these kind of discussions. So, but in the meantime, again, I'm making presentations here because several people write me on these things, and that lets me know that it is something that is permeating the Vaishnav community. Again, due to the influence of social media, where everything like wildfire takes off and spreads in the community, just like gossip or something, then these things and these conceptions tend to take root and quickly spread. And of course, if people want to have a discussion, they'll generally turn to people they have discussions with and bring it up. So I've been the one, I'm sure, of many persons that this is come in their purview via that means. People are either writing questions about it, what do you think about it? I once in the past wrote back to a couple of devotees and said, I'm really not trying to form a particular perspective, that you can ask, and I even mentioned it, I think, on a previous video. You can contact those persons, and I know of at this point, with the exception of some persons who obviously have made statements that I cannot digest, regarding Srila Prabhupada and things like that. But the other devotees, it's a perspective they're having, and you can speak to them and get a clearer picture. They're also making presentations regularly, right? And it's a number of devotees. It's not one or two people. It's a number of devotees. You can ask them and get some consensus. Now, if you're looking for balance, I said maybe it is a good idea to have a discussion with more than one perspective being offered, because it seems that either you get one perspective, quote, of a certain view, and then there's the view of the other side, so to speak. And that's what creates the dynamic of us versus them, and it shouldn't be like that. So if anything is truly open, it should be inclusive of the ability to sit and have dialogue with all perspectives, because we're seeking the absolute truth. And if it's truly vada, that discussion is truly vada, what should organically emerge from the discussion is truth. Where our own limitations may peak, right, we may have to table certain things because we may not be able to find absolutely mutually accepted truth in our discussions, but then we'll reconcile that's in us. There's some still lacking in us that doesn't allow organically for the absolute truth to manifest from our discussion. But at least the perspectives are made. And maybe many people hearing those perspectives, for them it will be able to awaken a particular openness of vision to now look more closely at everything. And for them, it may give more of an epiphany than it might even bring out in the discussion at the time. And then for those who are discussing, it may come retrospectively after discussion, because many things that go on in a discussion or even in any learning process, the fullness of the understanding and even realization of those things comes later on when there's introspection and digestion of what was spoken. So this is my plea. One, that it does not rise to the level of us versus them, but certainly I think for many devotees on the path, they need to offer their perspectives. Because right now it seems like there is a wave, so to speak, of people who, again, predominantly seems to have had some bad experience with Bhakti in one way, form, or fashion, and either in personal catharsis or if it's some epiphany that grew out of their subjective experience, but they're putting forward many things which, on the face of it, appear to challenge many things which are related to Sudha Bhakti. You understand? Like the absolute faith in Guru Sadhu Sastra. You understand? So, again, I'm offering up to have those discussions in any forum, and doing my due diligence and duty here. I'm answering questions for those devotees who did write in questions. It was a number of people, and there were different things, but they're all related. So hopefully this will suffice for now, to have some general discussion about this. I'm not trying to crusade on anything, and I would hope that those who are looking at various angles of Bhakti, again, I declare there's two visions, pure Bhakti and misapplied Bhakti, but either way, I'm hoping that's not a crusade, but is truly an individual, and now maybe some collective of individuals who are having an experience, and they're examining that experience, right? And they're having mutual discussions on what they think could possibly be better and what could be a better way of approach. So if it's in that framework, then it should be all right to have healthy discussion, because even when you have the best intentions, it may go a little bit awry, right? Because the only absolute thing we can depend on is Guru Sadhu Sastra, right? Now, I'm open to debate on that as well, right? And debate here meaning healthy discussion, not argument, right? All right, so I'm going to try to get to some of the other philosophical questions that came up, because I think those are of paramount importance, especially to those persons who wrote them. And I think I would be remiss if I, even though it seems like something that's pressing right now, I would be remiss if I kept this chain of thought and I did not go back, because I'm also trying to do a seva. And in doing that seva, I appeal to the blessings of devotees whom I'm trying to offer that service to. And also, everything is always for my own edification as well. So if somebody asks a question and I have to research that or look at it or repeat what I've heard from Guru Sadhu Sastra, is certainly to my benefit as well. So, my Dandavat Pranam devotees, Indian devotees, they're also welcome to chime in on these things as well. I don't know if people are getting in their social media a lot of these sort of things. It could be, social media is a funny thing also, in that maybe you connect to one thing at one time and suddenly your own personal social media becomes more dominated by that. And that may have very well be what happened. Somebody wrote me a question and sent me an article, then the article appears on my feed, and then next thing you know, there's a whole bunch of these sort of things. So that's why I've kind of addressed it today. All right, my Dandavat Pranam devotees, please bestow your causeless mercy on me. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhavevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Radhe Radhe.